why we say the things that we say as Muslims, and to improve relations with peoples of other faiths, because ultimately we are all trying to do what is good. We are all in favor of what is beneficial for the welfare of our communities, our societies. So we really should not be at odds with each other. We shouldn't have misunderstandings, especially in these days where lines of communication are readily available. So that's what we are here to share with you. That Islam, if we look at its most basic foundations, what are known as the 5 pillars of Islam, that in one way or another, I'm sure you would all agree that they represent good principles for life. Whether it is the first of the pillars, which is a declaration of faith, that one be open with one's faith, not to hide it, to pretend, but to be real. This is what I believe, this is who I am. That is the first step for the Muslim. For a person to be a Muslim, he or she should openly declare their faith. Faith that there is only one God, which virtually all societies in the world agree that there really is only one God. But how that God is perceived is where we find differences of understandings, etc. But the idea that there's ultimately one supreme being who governs all, this is shared by all societies around the world. And for the believing people, we are the majority. Those who claim that there is no supreme being, they are in fact a small, strange, abnormal minority. This is reality. I know those of you who are visiting who may be atheists might say, why would you want to say that? Well, this is what history shows us. Wherever we go in the world, whatever age, whatever society, whatever civilization, backwards, developed, underdeveloped, people believe in God. A minority you find around the world who say there is no God. So as believers, this is a common ground that we should share and help those who have lost their way to the state where they don't recognize that there is a God, help them to find their way back. And of course, for a Muslim, there is added to the basic declaration of faith that there is only one God, that the one who informed us of that, the messenger of God known as Muhammad ibn Abdullah, who appeared, was born in the 6th century after the time of Christ. He conveyed that message, and he not only conveyed it in word, but he also conveyed it in deed. So a Muslim, when he or she declares their faith, they not only recognize the unity of God, that there is one God, ultimate God, but also that the messenger who brought this message is to be followed. Meaning, he represents the guide in life. He is the example of how we should live our lives. That's the first pillar of Islam. And I'm sure all religions have comparable guides. People depend on, commit themselves to believing that they are the example for them. So I'm sure any person who believes in God would say, yes, that is a reasonable principle. We should have guides, should have somebody to show us how to live a good, righteous, pious, beneficial life. The second pillar of Islam, the prayer. Praying 5 times a day. Well, some people might say, well, that's a lot. How about once a week or a couple of times a week, maybe a little more. Well, of course, it's a choice. If a person commits himself or herself to pray 5 times a day, in other words, trying to communicate with God 5 times a day, trying to remember God 5 times a day, we say the more the merrier. Really, nothing bad about that. Even if you as an individual may personally feel it's a bit too much for you, but still, the idea if somebody wanted to do that's a good thing. Because the more we remember God, the better people we will be. So, again, the second pillar of Islam, 5 times daily prayer. No believer in God would say, hey, that's not good. No. The third pillar, fasting. Fasting in the month of Ramadan. 1 month every year, Muslims are required to fast for 30 days. Daylight hours. And fasting is something instituted in virtually every religion. Even if people today don't do it, we go back into the scriptures, you will find that people of past did. So if we're not doing it and they did it, it means somehow we slipped off the path a bit. We need to get back on the path. Because fasting was prescribed by God because it is good for human beings, whether physically or spiritually. And of course, the spiritual concerns are the greatest. Fasting, which teaches self-restraint, control of one's basic desires, so that throughout the rest of the year, when we're not fasting, the lessons learned in fasting should be applied. And of course, all of what we're talking about here are ideal principles that people should strive for. Now, I know you might say, but I know some Muslims who fast every year and they don't seem to be very restrained. They don't manage to restrain themselves at all. Well, probably because they're not fasting as they were supposed to fast. And because there are principles and rules for fasting. There is the letter of the law. You don't eat or drink or have sexual relations between dawn and sunset. That's the letter. But there's also spirit, where the Prophet said that the person who doesn't give up backbiting, telling lies, cursing, God has no reward for their fast. So a person may go through the physical requirements, but the spiritual requirements they're not taken care of. So naturally the fast doesn't have the required impact on the individual. The fourth pillar of Islam is zakah, or charity, which is an obligation on every member of the community who has surplus wealth. Everyone who has surplus wealth above a minimum is required to give 2.5% of it to the poor. Not to the church, the temple, or the mosque, or to the imam or the priest, but to the poor. Recirculating some of our surplus with the needy members of the society and the community. And again, anyone who believes in God, even if you didn't believe in God, you would say, that's a good thing. That's beneficial. It is helpful. And the last of the pillars, the one which might be a little different, that of the pilgrimage, Hajj, the fifth pillar of Islam, where Muslims once every year gather, some 3 million strong, It is a requirement once in a lifetime for those who are able. Those who are not are required to desire it.